Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm thrilled to be presenting the R2 UI Screen Designer, efficiency's new best friend. I'll tell you why I'm excited to be showing you this. R2 UI Screen Designer made its debut when R2 version 6 was first released. Yet it remains an underutilized area of the application that has some of the biggest payoffs when utilized. This tool is a game changer, allowing you to personalize your company's workspace like never before. Imagine for a moment being able to remove, resize, and replace components like fields, buttons, icons, and more to create your perfect interface. For example, reduce visual clutter by removing fields your company doesn't use, and relocate the most commonly used fields into a single screen. Your workspace should work for you, not the other way around. Redesign your most frequently used R2 screens to simplify your work. Design multiple themes, one for each of the functional areas of your company. For example, design a sales or warehouse theme that specifically benefits the users and tasks each role performs. Most importantly, prioritize what's important to you and remove what you don't use. Finally, let me touch on what this means for your team. With a screen designer, you can create a workflow with matching screen designs that speak to the features of your company and what you use most. Take a moment and build the screens that fit your company's workflow. Make R2 yours. Before we get started on the nitty-gritty, let me show you a target, if you will. What you're seeing here is the default layout for a new quote. Most of you will be familiar with this layout, and it most likely mirrors yours as well. Visually, there's some clutter because there's many fields and icons that are competing for your attention. In this iteration, all of the icons and fields that come out of the box with R2 are visible. Without removing too many fields or icons, here's a new reservation screen that I've cleaned up. Here you'll see the fields from the default layout have been aligned for easier target acquisition. I've removed some of the default icons and rearranged them as I saw fit. The item grid shows only the fields that make sense to my workflow. And look here. This is the shipping location and address I've pulled into the Information tab from the Shipping tab. More on this in a little bit. Let me drop down a level to the Account screen, and let's take a look at the features first. These features only work if your R2 employee is set up as an administrator or if the admin feature is granted to that user. To start the design mode, you'll hit the F12 button. To disable design mode, you can hit Shift F12. I'll point out here that Shift F12 just closes design mode. It doesn't save any of your changes. Drag and dropping screen components is as easy as holding down the Alt button and dragging the button or field or even field label to the position of your choice. And finally, the UI Command Center, we'll touch on this at the end. This lets you see all of the screen designs, take backups, and easily access them for further design. All right, I'm back to the Account screen. Now recall that the F12 button starts the UI design mode. You'll notice this in a couple of different ways. The data disappears from the screen, first of all, so you have a clear view of the fields and columns that you'll be editing. Second, the title bar up at the top left here shows UI design mode. To access a menu of features, right-click anywhere on the screen. The first option is Remove. Remove is used to delete a field, button, or tab from view. Let me illustrate this. I can right-click on the field here and remove. That takes the label and the field away. And similarly, if I were to do that for an icon, that will also take it away from my view. Second option on the menu is Reset Original. If you choose Reset to Original, R2 will wipe any of the screen design that you've done up until this point just on this screen. And be careful with this. It's not a rollback feature. It completely resets any prior screen design. Add from Original lets you really start to build your screens to match your workflow. Using this feature, a secondary window will appear representing the original screen layout. Here you can select fields from one tab and bring them onto another. Now, let's say that I wanted to be able to view the customer's credit limit without clicking around. Since the credit limit field is on the Details tab here, I'll click there first. Next, I'll right-click on the credit limit field and select Tick. Now I'll close this screen. I could also just drag it out of the way. And back on the screen that I want to design, I'm going to right-click and choose Drop. Don't be worried if it doesn't drop in the exact place you wanted. You can move the fields around. Now watch closely. For me to move a field, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and do a drag and drop. That lets me move the field anywhere that I want on my main page here. And it's the same thing with icons and buttons. For example, I'll hold down Alt and move the icon where I want it. Back to the field. When I drag and drop a field, the label comes with it. You see, if I move this credit limit field around by dragging the field itself, the label moves in lockstep. But if I hold down the Alt button and click on the label instead of the field, it moves independently. Here I'll stack the credit limit label over the field. Next on the menu is Customize menu. This corresponds to the drop-downs or menus at the top left of the screen for File, Edit, View, etc. You have options to drag and drop menu labels to your preferred sequence in here, or you can disable use of that feature entirely by deselecting Visible. Now that feature will no longer be visible or part of your workflow. Note the separate button here which allows you to reset these fields and designs independent of the rest of the screen. Continuing with the field labels, let me right-click on any of the headers down here on the grid. The first option is remove this column. That's pretty straightforward. I can get rid of the column very simply by choosing remove this column. But more effectively, I can go into More, which brings up a list of all of the fields that are possible for me to view or manipulate. Now you can see the sequence of all of the fields within here, which ones are visible, and the width. That width, once you type it in here, is permanently set to each one of these fields. So every time you open up the screen again, those fields will be set to the width you desire. And deselecting anything from being visible on any of these screens moves that field label down to the bottom. So you can see all of the visible fields are up at the top, and everything that's been removed from view that can be summoned back is down at the bottom here. Now, there are two more items in this menu, Save and Exit Designer. I'm going to jump to Exit Designer. I talked about this initially. One way to close the design view is to hold down the Shift key and hit the F12 button. As I mentioned earlier, if you do that, it takes you out of the Screen Designer and doesn't save any of your changes. That corresponds to this same menu item here. If you click Exit Designer, it's just going to close the design mode and it won't have saved any of my changes. Saving your work allows you to design more than one screen for different roles. For example, let me drill down and create a new save. Here you'll see Product Manager is the rule that I've been working with lately, and so R2 has suggested that I save it under that rule. For example, let me drill down and create a new rule. I'll click on the plus to show you an example. The drop-down next to the site label shows all of the different options that you have to set up rules. You can create rules by the site, region, subregion, and security group. While individual employees can design their own screens if they have permission, practically speaking, it makes sense to design a company standard to fit the fields and features of your workflow so they aren't inadvertently removed by individual users. The last thing I want to mention is the Control Center for Screen Designer. From the Launchpad, hold down the Control key and hit the F12 button. This is a list of all of the screens that you've customized along with their rule. By double-clicking on any of these rules, R2 will start the Screen Designer and drop you right into that screen so you can continue designing or fix something that you noticed. R2 backs up these rules as part of its normal backup procedures. However, if you're performing some heavy screen design, it's a good idea to export a backup in case you need to revert to a prior state or you've made a mistake in the process and need to restore. You can also use the Save and Import feature to share screen designs between R2 schemas. So for example, you can trade screen designs from your test system and move them into your production system. Be careful with this as always. Test it out on your test system. Make sure that you're comfortable with the screen design and the features that I've covered here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us.